You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 20th of September, 2024, and you're listening to episode 82 of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. Every week we get psychological, philosophical, and all manner of introspective. I'm David, and this week we are discussing the art of not trying. Not trying might feel a bit counterintuitive, especially in a world where we're constantly told to hustle harder, push through, and never stop striving. But what if I told you that one of the greatest thinkers in history proposed the exact opposite? What if Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher and author of the Tao Te Ching, was right when he said that the key to achieving more in life is actually to try less, to allow life to unfold naturally, without force, and to act with wu wei, or what we'll explore today, as non-striving. Now, before you start imagining this as some kind of passive sit back and let the universe handle everything approach, allow me to clarify. Lao Tzu isn't advocating for laziness or inaction. What he's talking about is a state of flow, a way of moving through life where our actions feel effortless and aligned with the natural rhythm of things, without the strain, without the constant effort to control. In today's episode, we're going to break down Lao Tzu's teachings on wu wei and explore how this ancient concept intersects with modern psychology. We'll look at what it means to let go of the need to strive and how adopting this philosophy can actually lead to more creativity, less stress, and a deeper sense of calm. So we're going to be asking some big questions today. Why are we so conditioned to believe that more effort equals better results? What are the psychological costs of this constant striving? And most importantly, how can we start to live in a way that feels more natural, more aligned with who we really are? I think you're going to find this episode especially interesting if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the pressures of modern life, or if you've ever wondered whether there might be a different, perhaps easier way to navigate through it all. So stick around as we explore the art of not trying, Lao Tzu's teachings on non-striving, and how they might just be the antidote to the burnout and anxiety so many of us experience today. Let's dive in. Okay, let's start by unpacking the core of today's topic, wu wei. This is a central concept in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, and it's often translated as non-action or effortless action. But before we go any further, it's important to clear up some potential misunderstandings about what wu wei actually means. Now, when we hear the phrase non-action, it might sound like Lao Tzu is telling us to do nothing, to just sit back and let life pass us by. But wu wei is far from laziness or inaction. It's not about sitting on the couch waiting for life to happen. Instead, wu wei is about moving through life in a way that feels natural and unforced, acting without struggle, without trying to force a specific outcome. Think of it like this. Imagine a river flowing smoothly around rocks in its path. The river doesn't stop and try to push the rocks out of the way. It simply flows around them, effortlessly adapting to whatever comes in its way. That's wu wei in action. It's this idea of going with the flow, of being in harmony with the natural order of things, rather than forcing our will onto the world. Lao Tzu's vision of life is one where we engage with the world. We act, we do what needs to be done, but we do it in a way that feels effortless, as if it's part of the natural flow of the universe. There's no resistance, no unnecessary strain. It's about aligning ourselves with the way things already are, rather than trying to bend reality to our desires. And this brings us to something that may sound surprisingly familiar to those of you who've studied modern psychology, what we now call flow states. The concept of flow, as defined by a psychologist, I always get his name wrong, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think that's right, and I apologize. Let's try that again. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi refers to those moments when we're so fully immersed in an activity that everything else seems to fall away. We lose track of time, we're completely focused, and everything feels easy. There's no strain, no effort. It's as if the task is doing itself through us. Sounds a lot like Wu Wei, doesn't it? Flow happens when our skills are perfectly matched to the challenge at hand. Not too easy, not too hard. And we're able to fully engage with the moment. Athletes often talk about being in the zone where their movements feel automatic and effortless. Writers talk about those moments when the words just pour out of them without any struggle. Musicians describe losing themselves in the music, where they're no longer thinking about the notes but simply letting the melody flow. And the interesting thing about flow is that it often leads to peak performance. When we're in a flow state, we actually perform better and we enjoy the process more because we're not overthinking or trying too hard. It's exactly what Lao Tzu was getting at with Wu Wei. When we stop trying to force things, they often turn out better than we could have planned. So how does this tie back to Wu Wei and Lao Tzu's teachings? Well, Lao Tzu believed that if we stop trying to control every little thing and instead allow ourselves to flow with life, we'll find that things naturally work out. This doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing. It means that we act, but without forcing. We follow our intuition, we trust the process, and we let things unfold naturally rather than constantly pushing against the current. Now, if we think about this in psychological terms, we might start to see how the idea of Wu Wei can benefit us in today's world, where so many of us are caught in this cycle of constant striving and over-effort. When we push too hard, whether it's at work, in our relationships, or even in our personal goals, we often end up feeling stressed, frustrated, and disconnected from the present moment. But when we approach life with a Wu Wei mindset, we allow ourselves to relax into the flow of things. We become more attuned to the moment, more open to possibilities, and more capable of handling challenges as they arise, because we're not trying to force outcomes. We're simply responding to life as it is, moment by moment. This idea of effortless action of Wu Wei offers us a way to engage with the world that's not about passivity, but about being present and responsive in a way that feels natural and aligned with the world around us. It's not about doing nothing, it's about doing the right thing at the right time with ease. So, in a way, Lao Tzu is offering us a timeless insight into human psychology. When we stop trying so hard, we often find ourselves in that sweet spot where life just flows. Okay, that's Wu Wei in a nutshell. Effortless action, not as laziness or inaction, but as a way of moving through life with grace and ease. And as we've just explored, this ancient concept has deep parallels with what modern psychology tells us about flow states and peak performance. And now, a word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Athletic Greens. No, it's not at all, actually. It's sponsored by me and my book, which is out on Amazon, and you can purchase it as a paperback or on the Kindle, and it sits very much alongside this podcast. So if you're interested in philosophy and psychology and ways that these ideas can be applied to our lives in general, then the book is a really great place to get some theory and some practical applications of it. The premise of the book, we go through a few different scenarios. We talk about authenticity, about gratitude, about letting go of stuff. And there's a lot of stoicism, there's some Buddhism in there, there's all sorts of philosophy and theology that covers this stuff. And the end point of it is for you to be able to reflect upon yourself and whether you are living according to how you would want to live organically, or whether you've adopted all of these frameworks and ideas that come from the external. God knows there's enough of those that hit us every day. So if you're interested in the podcast, if you're interested in that sort of thing, some philosophy, some psychology, and some actual uses of them in day-to-day living, then go and buy my book on Amazon. You have to just search The Observing Eye, or I will put a link in the show notes for you to go and have a look at that as well. And I'm hoping that you will find it useful. So yeah, go buy my book. Subliminal messaging. Buy my book. You will buy it. Yeah, but see what you think. Or don't. It's entirely up to you. There's no pressure. I have no expectation here. It is out into the world and I have let go of it. So it is just there. It exists. And you may enjoy it if you so choose. Thank you for your time. And we now return to the transmission. So we've just explored Wu Wei, this idea of effortless action that Lao Tzu so wonderfully captures in the Tao Te Ching. Now, let's shift our focus a little bit and talk about something that feels almost like the complete opposite of Wu Wei, something we are all too familiar with in today's world, and that's striving. It seems like everywhere we turn, we're told that striving is the key to success. We hear it in motivational speeches, we see it in the constant grind of social media, that whole rise and grind bullshit. And it's drilled into us from a young age, from school, thankfully. Thank you, school. We appreciate that, psychological fuckery that you've given us. Work harder, push through, never stop stopping. Never stop not stopping. If you're not constantly striving for something, whether it's success, improvement, or even happiness, then you're seen as complacent or lazy. But is this obsession with striving really serving us in any useful form? There was this saying in COVID during the lockdowns, and I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but it used to really fucking annoy me. And it was people saying, if you haven't done something or learned something during the pandemic, then you've not failed, you're just lazy. Like whilst there is a crisis and we're locked in our homes, I'm just going to go and learn Spanish and become proficient in accountancy because I've got nothing better to do, right? That's utter bullshit. Completely ignores the human experience. All of this, just nonsense, grind bollocks, basically. And as you can tell, I'm not a fan. And I'm sure that my language has just demonetized any of the YouTube stuff on this, but hey ho. C'est la vie. It's about the message, not the money, right? So let's take a look. I'm going to go back to script now. I've calmed down. My rant is over. Let's take a look at our modern world for a moment. We live in a culture that glorifies what some people call hustle culture. This idea that if you're not grinding every minute of the day, then you're falling behind. If you're not constantly pushing to improve, then you're failing. And while there's certainly value in hard work and dedication, there's also a darker side to this mindset that we often don't talk about enough. When we're always striving, always pushing to achieve more, be more, do more, and all that shit, it creates a kind of internal pressure. And this pressure, over time, can take a serious toll on our mental and emotional well-being. We start to tie our sense of self-worth to our achievements, to the things we accomplish, and this becomes a very slippery slope. Let's think about it in psychological terms. When you're constantly striving for more, your mind is often fixated on the future. You're focused on the next goal, the next milestone, the next task. But what does that actually mean for the present moment, which is fundamentally the only moment in which we experience, in which we exist? What it means is that the present becomes something to get through, something to survive on your way to the next thing. And this is where we see some of this psychological consequences of relentless striving. Striving in this way can lead to chronic stress and anxiety. Why? Because when you're always pushing for more, there's never a moment where you can simply stop and say, this is enough. There's always something more to achieve, something else to fix, something to improve, something to control. And psychologically, this leaves us in a constant state of dissatisfaction. In fact, studies show, we all like studies, don't we? Studies show that perfectionism, a trait that often goes hand in hand with excessive striving, is linked to higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even burnout. When we're perfectionistic, we're never satisfied with where we are, and we put immense pressure on ourselves to meet impossible standards. And here's the paradox of this mindset. The harder we push ourselves, the more likely we are to experience frustration, exhaustion, and emotional distress. And it's not just about psychological exhaustion either. Striving all the time can create this deep-seated belief that if we're not achieving, then we're not valuable. We start to measure our worth by our productivity, by the things we can show to the world as proof of our success, sometimes as proof of our existence. But as Lao Tzu would suggest, this is a fundamentally flawed way to live. When we're so caught up in striving, we miss out on the richness of the present moment. Instead of being fully engaged with life as it's happening, we're mentally somewhere else, chasing a future that we believe will finally bring us happiness or fulfillment. But the problem with the goalposts keep moving is that when we reach one milestone, another one appears. We achieve one thing and suddenly it's not enough. We need the next thing. It becomes this endless cycle. This is where Wu Wei offers us a radically different perspective. Instead of striving for more, Lao Tzu encourages us to let go of the need to control outcomes. He invites us to relax into the flow of life, to trust that things will unfold naturally without us constantly forcing them. Wu Wei doesn't mean we stop doing things, but it means we stop over-efforting. We stop resisting what is and trying to manipulate life to fit our desires. Psychologically, this idea of non-striving is very powerful. It aligns with concepts we see in mindfulness and meditation practices, where the emphasis is on acceptance of the present moment as it is. There's a term in mindfulness that you might be familiar with, and that's radical acceptance. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the idea that we accept things as they are without trying to change them. When we do this, we reduce psychological resistance, which is often at the heart of so much of our stress and frustration. In modern therapy, particularly in acceptance and commitment therapy, this concept of letting go of the need to control everything is a core principle. The idea is that when we let go of trying to force life to go the way we want, we actually open ourselves up to more peace and less stress. By accepting things as they are, rather than always pushing for more or something different, we can reduce that inner friction that comes from constantly striving. Lao Tzu's Wu Wei is essentially a form of radical acceptance. It's a reminder that life doesn't need to be so hard. We don't need to be constantly striving, constantly pushing. In fact, Lao Tzu suggests that when we stop striving and start flowing with the natural rhythms of life, things often turn out better than if we'd tried to force them. Take a moment now just to reflect on your own life. Where are you constantly striving? Where are you pushing yourself, perhaps unnecessarily, to achieve, to be better, or to control outcomes? And what would it feel like if you loosened that grip? If you embraced a little more wu wei, a little more trust in the process of life? Of course, I'm not saying that we should never strive to set goals. There's certainly a time and a place for effort and hard work. But Lao Tzu's wisdom, and indeed modern psychology, invites us to question the need for constant striving. When does effort turn into over-effort? When does striving actually get in the way of what we're trying to achieve? In the next section, we're going to explore how this concept of wu wei, of letting go of unnecessary effort, can actually lead to more spontaneity and creativity in our lives. It's in this relaxed, non-striving state that some of the best ideas and insights tend to emerge. Let's dive into that next. What if I told you that letting go of the need to strive could actually unlock something much more valuable? Something that many of us are constantly searching for: creativity and spontaneity. Now, creativity is often seen as one of the highest expressions of human potential. Whether you're an artist, a writer, a musician, or simply someone who enjoys thinking outside the box, creativity is something we all admire and work towards. But here's the irony. Creativity doesn't come from striving. In fact, more often than not, the harder we try to force creativity, the more it slips through our fingers. It's a bit like when you're constipated and you try and force out a poo and then nothing happens. Then if you go away and you just sort of relax a bit and you do something else, you distract your mind, then, give it half an hour and that poo just glides out. It just glides right out of there. That's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's like constipation of the mind. Now, this is where Lao Tzu's teaching on wu wei comes into play, not with constipation, it might, but with creativity. Lao Tzu understood something that many creative people have intuitively discovered, that creativity flourishes when we allow ourselves to relax. When we let go of the need to produce something specific and instead embrace spontaneity and openness, just let that poo glide right out. Let me paint a picture for you, not in poop. Imagine, I gotta stop it. Imagine a writer sitting at their desk. You can't, can you? Because you're just imagining a writer straining on the toilet. Imagine a writer sitting at their desk, staring at a blank page. They've got a deadline looming, and the pressure to produce something brilliant is weighing heavily on their mind. They type a sentence, they delete it. They type another, and they delete that one too. They're trying so hard to create something great, but nothing is flowing. Now contrast this with the same writer, but in a different situation. They're not sitting at their desk, they're out for a walk, or maybe lying in bed just before falling asleep. They're not actively trying to write, they're not even thinking about their project. And then suddenly, an idea appears. The words start to form in their mind effortlessly, like they're just waiting to be written down. This is the paradox of creativity. When we stop trying so hard, when we relax and let go, that's often when the best ideas come. And this is exactly what Lao Tzu was getting at with Wu Wei. Creativity doesn't thrive under pressure or control. It thrives in an atmosphere of openness and relaxation where ideas are free to bubble up naturally. So what's going on here psychologically? Why does letting go of the need to create often lead to more creativity? Well, part of it has to do with how our brains work. When we're in a state of relaxation, when we're not hyper-focused on solving a problem or producing something, the brain enters what's known as the default mode network. This is a state where we're not actively thinking about anything in particular, but our minds are still wandering and making connections in the background. In this state, we often experience what's known as creative insight, those aha moments where a solution or idea seems to come out of nowhere. You might be in the shower, driving, or even daydreaming, and suddenly the answer to a problem you've been struggling with just clicks into place. And the funny thing is, you weren't even trying to find the answer at that moment. It came to you when you stopped looking for it. This is Wu Wei in action. By letting go, by stepping back and allowing our minds to relax, we open ourselves up to spontaneity and insight. In fact, many of the most creative people, whether they're artists, writers, scientists, or inventors, have talked about the importance of giving their minds space to wander, to not be so tightly controlled. Take Albert Einstein, for example. He's quite famous, isn't he? And he's also quite famous for saying that many of his best ideas came to him while he was playing the violin, not when he was sitting at his desk trying to solve equations. Or think about how many famous writers and poets talk about their creative breakthroughs happening when they're away from their work, while walking, daydreaming, or engaging in completely unrelated activities. This is not a coincidence. Creativity flourishes when we stop trying to force it. It's in those moments of relaxation and spontaneity that we can tap into the deeper, more intuitive parts of our minds. And this ties back directly to Wu Wei, acting without forcing, creating without striving. Another interesting psychological concept here is what's known as incubation. Research on creativity shows that when we take a break from a problem or a task and let it incubate in the back of our minds, we're much more likely to come up with creative solutions than if we sit there and try to force an answer. Essentially, by letting go of the need to figure something out, we allow our subconscious mind to work on the problem in the background. And often, that is where the magic happens. Lao Tzu understood this long before modern psychology caught on. His philosophy of Wu Wei teaches us that the best outcomes often arise when we step back, relax, and let life unfold naturally, rather than trying to control every aspect of it. And this is especially true when it comes to creativity. When we allow ourselves to flow with life rather than fighting against it, we open ourselves up to moments of spontaneity and inspiration that we simply cannot access when we're forcing things. Creativity does not respond well to pressure. It responds to space, to freedom, to openness. And Wu Wei invites us to create from that place of ease. So how can we apply this in our own lives? How can we cultivate more Wu Wei in our creative processes? One way is by giving ourselves permission to step away from the task at hand. If you're working on something creative and you feel stuck, instead of forcing yourself to keep going, try doing something completely different. Take a walk, meditate, listen to music. Often when we're not directly focusing on the problem, that's when the best ideas come. I actually have a similar process to this, but I actually jump on a game called Valheim, which is like this Viking game, and you have to chop down trees and build houses and cook food and fight grey dwarves and goblins. And it's great. I can spend half an hour just doing that, and it's the complete detachment of the mind, and it's low pace of a game enough for me to be able to just not get all stressy. It's not like playing Warzone, you know? The adrenaline isn't pumping. I'm building a hut and cooking some meat. It's delightful. Another way to practice Wu Wei in creativity is to approach your work with a sense of play. Instead of putting pressure on yourself to produce something great or perfect, try experimenting with your ideas, playing with possibilities without worrying about the outcome. When we take the pressure off, we often find that our creativity starts to flow naturally. Don't take everything so seriously. And remember, Wu Wei isn't about being passive or disengaged. It's about creating with ease, about acting in harmony with the natural flow of life. It's about trusting that the right ideas, the right solutions will come when we stop trying to force them. So the next time you're feeling creatively blocked, take a moment to ask yourself, am I trying too hard? And if the answer is yes, maybe it's time to step back, relax, and allow your creativity to flow in its own time. That is the essence of Wu Wei. Acting without effort, creating without strain, allowing things to unfold naturally and spontaneously, just letting the poop slide right out. Now I want to delve into one of the most profound and, quite frankly, mind-bending aspects of Wu Wei, and that's the paradox of control. Lao Tzu presents us with a striking idea, one that flies in the face of much of what we're taught in Western culture, that the less we try to control, the more things tend to go our way. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? We're so used to thinking that success comes from control, from planning, from making sure everything goes according to our agenda. In the West, we're often taught that willpower, effort, and determination are the cornerstones of achievement. But Lao Tzu challenges this notion. He suggests that control, especially over things that are beyond our influence, is not only unnecessary, but actually counterproductive. Let's just take a moment to reflect on our own lives. Think about a time when you were trying to control something. Perhaps it's a situation at work, something in a relationship, or even just an outcome that you were hoping for. You probably felt that if you didn't manage every detail, if you didn't steer things in the direction you wanted, everything would fall apart. But here's the thing. How often does life really go according to plan, even when we try to control it? And more importantly, how does all that effort to control make us feel? How does that make you feel? The psychological research on control tells us something very interesting. Trying to control too much is actually a major source of stress and anxiety. I think we kind of all know that, don't we, really? We don't need the research. We know that it causes stress. The more that we believe that we have to manage and control everything, the more pressure that we put on ourselves. And when things inevitably don't go according to plan, we experience frustration, disappointment, and perhaps a little sense of failure. I'm such a failure. This brings us to an idea that psychologists call the illusion of control. It's the belief that we can control outcomes that in reality are largely outside of our hands. When we're caught in this illusion, we expend a lot of energy trying to manipulate or direct situations, people, and events that are, by their very nature, unpredictable and uncontrollable. And that constant effort to maintain control can wear us down. But what if, as Lao Tzu suggests, we didn't need to control everything? What if letting go of the need to control actually led to better results, greater peace of mind, and more natural flow in our lives? Here comes the paradox. When we let go of trying to force things, life often unfolds in a smoother, more harmonious way. This doesn't mean we don't act or make decisions. Rather, it means we stop trying to manipulate every detail and we allow things to happen as they will. Lao Tzu teaches us that the more we let go, the more aligned we become with the natural order of life, the Tao. And when we're aligned with the natural order, things tend to fall into place more easily than when we're trying to impose our will on the world. This isn't just philosophical. It's deeply psychological too. In psychology, there's a concept called cognitive flexibility, which refers to the ability to adapt our thinking and behavior in response to changing circumstances. People who are cognitively flexible are better able to handle life's challenges because they're not too rigidly attached to one outcome. They can adjust, flow, and pivot when things don't go as expected. Lao Tzu's Wu Wei is essentially a call for cognitive flexibility. It's about being open to what comes, rather than insisting on controlling what happens. One of the biggest sources of stress in our lives is the gap between what we want to happen and what's actually happening. When we cling to a specific outcome, when we're convinced that things have to go a certain way, we create tension within ourselves. But when we let go of the need for things to go exactly as we've planned, we create space for peace. This is one of the gifts of Wu Wei. It's about releasing that tension and allowing things to unfold as they will, without the need to force or manipulate. Think about it this way. Imagine holding onto a rope and pulling it as hard as you can. The tighter you pull, the more resistance you feel, and the more strain it puts on your muscles. But what happens if you simply loosen your grip? The tension disappears and you're no longer engaged in the struggle. Wu Wei is like loosening your grip on life. It's about easing up, trusting that things will work out, and letting go of the need to constantly pull and push in a specific direction. The idea of letting go of control is particularly relevant in situations that are inherently uncertain, whether that's in our careers, our relationships, or whatever we're doing personally. In moments of uncertainty, our instinct is often to tighten our grip, to try to control the outcome because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But Lao Tzu invites us to take a different approach. He suggests that in times of uncertainty, instead of trying to control, we should trust in the natural flow of life, trusting that the Tao will guide us in the right direction. Just trust in the universe, man. That's all it is. And again, Doesn't mean we stop making decisions. Doesn't mean we stop taking action. Wu Wei is not passivity. It is acting with ease, with a sense of trust and openness to whatever comes. It's about recognizing that there is a natural rhythm to life, and that when we align ourselves with that rhythm, rather than fighting against it, we experience less resistance and more flow. From a psychological perspective, this is incredibly powerful. Letting go of control can reduce anxiety, lower stress levels, and improve our emotional well-being. In fact, research shows that people who practice acceptance and surrender in difficult situations, rather than trying to control everything, tend to have better mental health outcomes. They're more resilient, more adaptable, and more capable of navigating life's ups and downs. So the next time you find yourself gripping too tightly, trying to control something that's outside of your hands, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, how could you practice Wu Wei in this situation? You might be surprised by how much easier things become when you stop trying to force them. So far, we've discussed how Lao Tzu's concept of Wu Wei, or effortless action, can help us navigate creativity, reduce stress, and even allow us to let go of the need to control outcomes. But all of these insights lead to a bigger question. How can we live in harmony with the natural flow of life itself? How can we align ourselves with what Lao Tzu called the Tao, or the Way? In Taoism, the Tao is often described as the underlying principle of the universe, a force that moves through all things, guiding the natural rhythms of life. The Tao isn't something we can see or touch, but it's something we can feel when we stop resisting life and start flowing with it. Lao Tzu encourages us to live in harmony with the Tao, to align ourselves with the natural order of things, rather than constantly pushing against the current. Let's think about what this means on a practical level. Living in harmony with the Tao is about recognizing that life has its own rhythm and flow, and that trying to fight against this natural order often leads to frustration and suffering. When we're constantly pushing, controlling, and resisting what is, we create a kind of internal friction. But when we learn to trust the process of life, to move with the flow rather than against it, we experience a greater sense of ease. One of the most powerful teachings of the Tao Te Ching is that life is full of cycles: times of growth, times of rest, times of success, and times of challenge. Lao Tzu encourages us to embrace these cycles, to recognize that nothing is permanent and that each phase of life has its place in the natural order. In many ways, this is a call to accept the present moment, exactly as it is, rather than constantly striving to be somewhere else or to make things different. From a psychological perspective, living in harmony with the Tao is about developing what we might call equanimity, the ability to remain calm and centered no matter what's happening around us. Equanimity doesn't mean we stop caring or that we become passive. It simply means that we accept life's ups and downs without being thrown off balance by them. In modern psychology, we see a similar concept in mindfulness practices, where the focus is on being fully present in the moment without judgment or resistance. When we practice mindfulness, we're learning to accept things as they are without getting caught up in the need to change or control them. And this is exactly what Lao Tzu is teaching us with the Tao. When we stop resisting life, when we stop trying to force things to be different, we open ourselves up to a deeper sense of presence. Living in harmony with the Tao is about trusting that life has its own wisdom, its own natural flow. We don't have to know everything or control everything. In fact, part of the wisdom of the Tao is recognizing that there's so much we don't and can't know. The universe is vast and complex and often unpredictable. And yet within that unpredictability, there is a natural order, a flow that we can tap into if we're willing to trust it. This is where Wu Wei comes in. When we stop trying to control life and instead allow ourselves to flow with it, we become aligned with the Tao. It's like sailing a boat with the current rather than against it. You're still guiding the boat, you're still steering, but you're moving with the natural flow of the water rather than struggling against it. And the beauty of living in alignment with the Tao is that it frees us from so much of the stress and anxiety that comes from constantly trying to make life conform to our desires. When we accept that life has its own timing, its own cycles, we can relax into the present moment and trust that things will unfold as they're meant to. Now, this doesn't mean that life will always go the way we want it to. Challenges, setbacks, and difficulties are all part of the natural flow of life. But Lao Tzu's wisdom reminds us that these moments are just as much a part of the Tao as the good times. There's a deep psychological insight here. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means acknowledging what is without resistance and learning to flow with it. Psychologically, this is a powerful practice. By accepting life's challenges as part of the natural order, we can reduce our suffering and navigate difficulties with greater resilience and grace. This is why so many modern therapeutic practices emphasize acceptance. Whether it's through mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, or even cognitive behavioral approaches that encourage us to let go of unrealistic expectations and focus on what we can control. At its core, this is about letting go of resistance and living in harmony with life as it is. But living in harmony with the Tao is more than just accepting life's challenges. It's also about recognizing the beauty and wisdom that comes from flowing with the natural rhythms of life. When we're aligned with the Tao, we're more in tune with our intuition, more open to the opportunities that arise, and more capable of handling life's uncertainties with a sense of calm and trust. So, how can we begin to live in harmony with the Tao in our everyday lives? One way is by cultivating a sense of trust in the process of life. Instead of constantly trying to force things to happen in our timeline, we can practice patience and openness. We can remind ourselves that everything has its season and that sometimes the best course of action is to wait, to observe, and to let things unfold in their own time. Another way to align with the Tao is by practicing mindfulness, by becoming fully present in each moment and accepting things as they are without judgment or resistance. When we're mindful, we're able to experience life more fully without the constant pull of the past or the future. And in doing so, we tap into the flow of the Tao, the natural order of life that is always moving, always unfolding, with or without our efforts. So as we come to the end of this section, let's have a bit more reflection. You know you like to reflect. Where are you resisting the natural flow of things? Where are you trying to control outcomes, force situations, or rush the process? And what would it feel like to let go? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Go on, just let go. Just let go a little bit. Just do it. Do it. Trust that life has its own wisdom, its own timing. Living in harmony with the Tao isn't the Tao. I keep doing it now like it's a rod of wood, the wooden rod of life. This is about acting in alignment with the natural rhythms of life, about trusting that there is a bigger picture at play, even when we can't see it. When we live this way, we experience more flow, more connection to the world around us. Let's dive a bit deeper into what might be the most important and, for many of us, the most challenging aspect of all of this, and that's surrender. But, not surrender in the sense of giving up or quitting or waving the white flag. I'm talking about psychological surrender, the kind of letting go that actually brings clarity and resilience to our lives. So what do we mean by psychological surrender? At its core, surrender is about releasing the need to force outcomes and instead trusting the natural flow, as we've been discussing throughout this entire episode. It's the recognition that while we can act and make decisions, there are many aspects of life that are simply beyond our control. And when we stop resisting that fact, when we let go of the struggle to control everything, we create a space for acceptance. Now, again, doesn't mean we become passive or disengaged. Surrender is not about inaction. It's about approaching life's challenges with a different mindset, one that's open, flexible, and willing to adapt, rather than rigidly trying to force things to go our way, just crowbarring our way through our problems. In modern psychology, this idea of surrender shows up in many places, particularly in mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy. Both of these approaches teach us to let go of the constant need to control or avoid difficult emotions, thoughts, or situations. Instead, we are encouraged to accept things as they are without judgment and to trust that we can handle whatever comes our way. Think about this for a moment. How much energy do we spend every day trying to control things that are beyond our influence? Whether it's worrying about the future, trying to change someone's opinion, or attempting to plan every detail of our lives, we expend so much effort trying to make life go according to our script. But the truth is that most of life is uncertain and unpredictable and outside of our control entirely. And when we fight against this reality, we just create a huge mass of stress within ourselves. Because when you think about it, you're fundamentally doing battle with the universe. And that takes some serious main character syndrome to think that you're actually able to do that. Yeah, that's just not, it's not a thing. Think about that for a minute. It is not a thing. What's wonderful about psychological surrender is that it invites us to let go of that fight. It encourages us to trust that even though we cannot control everything, we can still navigate some of those uncertainties if we stop resisting them. It's about shifting from a mindset of I need to control this to I can trust that I'll handle whatever comes. And that is a very powerful shift. One of the key benefits of, I nearly said that's a very powerful shit, and now we're going back to that constipated writer. One of the key benefits of psychological surrender is a reduction in stress. When we stop trying to control everything, we allow ourselves to relax, both mentally and physically. Think about the last time that you were really stressed out about something. Maybe it was a deadline at work or you were arguing with your spouse. How much of that stress was tied to the belief that you needed to control the outcome? And how much of that stress was relieved when you finally accepted that some things are just outside of your control? This is where Lao Tzu's teachings on Wu Wei become so valuable. When we surrender to the flow of life, when we stop trying to force things and instead trust that we can handle whatever arises, we are no longer caught in a battle with reality. We are instead moving with it, allowing life to unfold naturally. And paradoxically, it's often when we stop trying to control everything that things start to work out more smoothly. One of the most profound psychological shifts that comes with surrender is the realization that we don't need to have everything figured out. In fact, we can't. Let's be honest. Life is full of uncertainty, and no amount of planning or effort or Gantt charts or spreadsheets is going to eliminate that. But what we can do is learn to trust in the process of life. In Buddhism, there's a teaching known as the wisdom of uncertainty, which complements Lao Tzu's philosophy beautifully. The idea is that uncertainty is not something to fear or resist. It's a natural part of life. And when we learn to embrace that uncertainty, we stop wasting energy on trying to predict or control the future. Instead, we focus on the present moment, trusting that the next step will reveal itself in time. This is the essence of psychological surrender, being present with what is, without getting lost in the need to control what's next. When we stop fearing uncertainty and start trusting that we can handle whatever comes, we become more resilient, more adaptable, and ultimately more at peace with ourselves and the world around us. So how do we practice psychological surrender in our daily lives then? Well, the first step is awareness, as it normally is. Always back on self-awareness again. Well, it's because that's the key. That's the key to all of this is self-awareness. If you are not aware of it, you cannot change it. You have to start by noticing where you're trying to control things that are beyond your reach. It might be on your relationships, or it might be your own thoughts and emotions. Once you've identified those areas, you have to ask yourself, what would it feel like to let go of these emotions, these thoughts, these things that I'm trying to control? What would it be like to just trust that things are going to unfold as they're meant to, rather than trying to force it? These are questions, I keep repeating similar questions because I'm trying to drive this idea home, that you have to think about, or just imagine, what would it feel like to let go of all of this? If you were given the option, and we are given the option, it's all a choice, but it doesn't always feel like it, to just loosen the grip, what does that feel like? Ultimately, all of this psychological surrender comes down to trust. It comes down to trusting ourselves, trusting the process of life, and trusting that we have the capacity to handle whatever comes our way. Lao Tzu's teachings on Wu Wei and living in harmony with the Tao remind us that life is not something to be controlled or conquered. It is not a conquest. Life is to be experienced. It's something to be flowed with. And when we learn to let go of the need to control every single detail, we open ourselves up to a life that's richer, more peaceful, and more aligned with the natural order of things. We're in the final section now, and in this section, I want to bring our focus to something that I'm sure many of us are already going to be familiar with in practice, and that's meditation and mindfulness. Now, if you've ever tried meditation, you've probably encountered the challenge of the mind's constant chatter, that desire to control your thoughts or to achieve something during the practice. And this is where today's lesson really comes into play. How Wu Wei, the art of non-striving, is at the heart of meditation and mindfulness. In meditation, one of the biggest mistakes we often make is approaching it like a task, something to get done. We might sit down with the goal of clearing our minds, of reaching some peaceful, blissful state of nirvana, or of just feeling a bit more calm. But anyone who's tried meditation knows that the more you try to control your thoughts or force yourself to feel a certain way, the more elusive that mindset becomes. Now, this is where Wu Wei comes in. Just like in life, the less you try to force something in meditation, the more natural the process becomes. Meditation at its core is about being with what is. It's about allowing thoughts, sensations, and emotions to arise and pass without attaching to them, without needing them to be different. In many ways, meditation is a direct practice of Wu Wei, doing without forcing. So let's break this down a bit further. Lao Tzu teaches us to act without effort, to flow with life rather than forcing it. In meditation, this principle applies directly. Instead of trying to stop your thoughts or achieve some special state of enlightenment, the practice is simply to observe, to watch your thoughts come and go without trying to control them. The moment we let go of the need to do it right, we allow ourselves to drop into the natural rhythm of our experience. If you think about it, the essence of mindfulness is also about this same non-striving. Mindfulness teaches us to bring our attention to the present moment without judgment and without trying to change it. Whether you're sitting in formal meditation or simply practicing mindfulness during your day, the goal is not to force the mind into a specific state, but rather to notice and accept what's happening right now. That could be the breath, the physical sensation, or a passing thought or emotion. In that way, mindfulness and Wu Wei are deeply connected. They're both about being in the flow of the present moment without needing to change or manipulate it. Now, I want to acknowledge something that can be tricky about this idea. As humans, we tend to be goal-oriented. Even when we come to meditation or mindfulness, we often carry the desire to get something out of it. Maybe it's some clarity, maybe it's just a break from the stress of life. But the irony is that the more we chase after those things in our practice, the harder they are to attain. This is because striving and mindfulness are at direct odds with each other. The very act of striving pulls us out of the present moment and into a future-oriented mindset, where we're constantly seeking something different than what's here now. Lao Tzu's wisdom encourages us to step back from that constant seeking. He teaches us that the more we let go of the need to achieve something, the more we naturally find what we're looking for. This applies beautifully to meditation and mindfulness. When we stop striving for peace or clarity in our practice, when we simply sit with what is, peace and clarity often emerge on their own. I'm reminded of a teaching from the Zen tradition that aligns perfectly with Wu Wei. It goes something like this. Don't seek enlightenment, just sit. In other words, the practice itself is enough. The moment we try to use meditation as a tool to achieve something, whether that's enlightenment, calm, or some other state, we've moved out of the space of non-striving and into effort. And when we're in effort, we're not flowing with life, we're trying to control it. But meditation, just like life, doesn't respond well to being forced. The more we can allow ourselves to just sit and be without expectation, the more we enter in the space of Wu Wei, the space of effortless action, where things arise naturally and spontaneously. In that space, we're not chasing anything. We're simply allowing ourselves to be in the present moment, to experience life as it is, without needing to change anything. How can we bring this idea of non-striving into our meditation or mindfulness practice then? Well, one way is to start by letting go of any goals or expectations before we begin. When you sit down to meditate, remind yourself that you're not trying to achieve anything. Your job is simply to be present with whatever arises. If thoughts come, let them come. If you feel restless, notice the restlessness without trying to push it away. If calm arises, notice that too, without clinging to it or wishing it would stay. Another way to practice non-striving in meditation is to focus on the process rather than the outcome. Meditation isn't about getting somewhere. It's about being fully present with the experience as it unfolds, moment by moment. Whether your mind is busy or calm, whether your body feels relaxed or exhausted, your task is to simply observe it without judgment and without trying to make it different. And perhaps the most important piece of advice is to just be patient with yourself. If you notice that you're striving, trying to achieve something or control your experience, that's okay. is perfectly natural. The key is to gently bring your awareness back to the present moment, back to the practice of just being. Lao Tzu's Wu Wei isn't about perfection. It's about allowing things to unfold in their own time, including your own progress in meditation. At the end of the day, both Lao Tzu's philosophy and the practice of mindfulness invite us to embrace life as it is, without needing it to be different. This is the essence of Wu Wei, non-striving, effortless action. Whether we're meditating, navigating a challenge, or simply going through our daily routines, the less we try to control or force things, the more naturally they tend to flow. And the more present we become, the more peace and clarity we experience without even trying. So the next time you sit down to meditate or practice mindfulness, take a moment to remind yourself that you don't need to do anything. There's nothing to achieve. Just sit. Just be. Let go of the need for the practice to be a certain way and allow it to unfold naturally. That's the true meaning of Wu Wei, and it's a practice that can bring a profound sense of ease and peace into your life. As we wrap up this episode on Wu Wei and the art of non-striving, have a think about taking some of what resonates with you and apply it to your own life, whether it's through your meditation practice, your work, or simply how you move through the world. Lao Tzu's teachings remind us that sometimes the best way forward is to stop trying so hard, to let go, and to trust the natural flow of life. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on the subject of Lao Tzu and the art of non-striving. It's the end of the episode, and I just want to take a moment to reflect on everything that we've explored together. We've journeyed through Lao Tzu's timeless teachings on Wu Wei, the art of non-striving, and seen how this ancient wisdom offers us a radically different way of engaging with life, one that's less about effort and control and more about trust, flow, and acceptance. We started by breaking down Wu Wei, what it really means to act without forcing, to be in harmony with life's natural rhythms rather than constantly pushing against them. From there, we looked at how our modern culture of striving, productivity, and constant hustle often leads us to burnout, stress, and dissatisfaction. Lao Tzu offers an antidote to that, a way of being that encourages us to stop resisting the present moment and to trust that life has its own way of unfolding. We've also seen how Wu Wei applies to creativity and spontaneity, how the best ideas and insights often come when we're not trying to force them, but rather when we're in a relaxed, open state of mind. We talked about the paradox of control, that sometimes the less we try to control, the more things naturally fall into place, and how living in harmony with the Tao, Lao Tzu's vision of the natural way of the universe, can bring us more peace, balance, and clarity in our daily lives. But perhaps one of the most powerful takeaways from today's discussion is the idea of psychological surrender, the ability to let go of the need to control everything, to trust in life's flow, and to embrace the wisdom of uncertainty. This kind of surrender doesn't mean giving up or being passive. Instead, it means cultivating a mindset of openness, resilience, and trust. Trust that you'll be able to handle whatever comes, even if it doesn't go according to your plans. Finally, we explored how Wu Wei applies to meditation and mindfulness, two practices where non-striving is essential. In meditation, just like in life, the more we try to control our experience, the harder it becomes to find peace. But when we let go of the need to reach a certain outcome, when we simply sit with what is, we discover that peace and clarity often arise naturally. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the best way to move forward is just to stop trying so hard. Lao Tzu's wisdom teaches us that life doesn't have to be such a struggle. When we stop resisting, stop forcing, we can tap into a sense of ease, balance, and presence that allows us to navigate life's ups and downs with more grace. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things at the right time with a sense of trust and alignment. I'll encourage you to take this idea of Wu Wei into your day-to-day life. See what happens when you flow with life rather than pushing against it. You might just find that things fall into place more naturally than you ever imagined. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration today. I hope that Lao Tzu's teachings on Wu Wei have given you some valuable insights and tools for living a life with a little less stress, a little less striving, and a deeper connection to the present moment. And as always, a huge thank you to everybody who has subscribed and engaged with the podcast so far. Your support, your presence, your attention, your awareness is always deeply appreciated. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you haven't subscribed, then please consider doing so, or just leave a review or share it with someone who might find it interesting. Your support helps us to continue making this sort of content. And it also helps us to understand what stuff you like and what you don't, so that we can make content that's actually interesting and people want to hear about. As always, if anything in this episode has resonated with you anyway, then I would love to hear from you. You can share your stories via Patreon at patreon.com/theobservingeye. You'd think I'd remember this by now, this section, or on social media. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theobservingeye and on TikTok and Instagram with the handle @theobservingeye as well. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope it's been useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writing or work around psychology, philosophy, and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.